I'm going to tell you something. Most people spend their entire lives avoiding, not because they're weak, but because facing it demands a kind of courage most never develop. What comes next isn't the soft, comforting advice you learned as a kid. It's not the optimism teachers package for you, or the motivational slogans society repeats to keep you calm, predictable and manageable. What I'm about to reveal is older than any modern self-help philosophy, sharper than any cliché about positivity, and more enduring than any rulebook written by people who never understood how the world actually works. 5 centuries ago, in a world defined by fragile alliances, shifting loyalties, and brutal political chess, a man named Machiavelli observed human nature with a clarity that frightened the powerful. He wrote what he saw, not what people wanted to hear, not what moral authorities wished were true, but what repeated itself across kingdoms, courts, and everyday life. His insight was so unfiltered, so honest, that it was banned, condemned, and feared. Yet it passed from ruler to ruler, strategist to strategist, leader to leader, because those who held responsibility understood something the average person still refuses to accept. Comfort is pleasant, but truth is useful, and that truth, Machiavelli's truth, is what you're going to hear now. Because whether you realize it or not, these ideas influence the systems around you every single day. In boardrooms, in politics, in communities, in relationships, in the small decisions people make when no one is watching. You may think life is driven by fairness, by logic, by civilized morality, but Machiavelli understood something more primal. People respond to incentives, emotions, perceptions, fears, and opportunities long before they respond to ideals. If you don't understand that, you're navigating the world blindfolded. But once you do understand it, you start seeing patterns everywhere, patterns you can't unsee. So before we go any deeper, prepare yourself. Because after this, your perspective won't return to what it was. You'll start noticing the calculations behind decisions, the motives behind kindness, the strategy behind confidence, the hesitation behind weakness. You'll see the structure beneath the surface. And once the structure becomes visible, you can stop being a piece on the board and start becoming someone who actually understands the game being played around you. Let's begin with the first illusion. Nearly everyone believes that human beings make decisions with logic, with reason, with calm analysis. You've been told that your entire life, and maybe you've even tried to live that way. Weigh the facts, consider outcomes, choose rationally. But look around. Look at the choices people make every day. Look at the diets they abandon, the relationships they chase, the opportunities they overlook, the habits that sabotage them. If people were rational, none of that would happen. Machiavelli didn't have modern psychology, but he didn't need it. He observed people with brutal honesty and wrote one of the most important truths you'll ever hear. People judge far more by appearances than by reality, because appearances are what they can understand immediately. What something seems to be will always hit harder than what something actually is. People respond to image, to emotion, to story, to feeling. That's not cynicism, it's reality. It doesn't make people stupid. It makes them human. Think about the last argument you lost, even when you knew you were right. Think about the last time your advice went ignored, though it was obviously sensible. Think about every moment you watched someone chase a path that made no sense except for how it made them feel in the moment. Logic is slow, emotion is fast, and in a world running at full speed, the fast response wins. Once you understand this, persuasion looks different, influence looks different, leadership looks different. You stop wondering why people ignore facts and start understanding how to communicate in a way they can absorb. Not by manipulation. Machiavelli wasn't teaching that, but by acknowledging that humans aren't machines. They're emotional creatures trying to survive in a complex world. The next truth is one that unsettles many people because it challenges how they see themselves. Strength, Machiavelli observed, isn't about domination or cruelty. It's about stability, resilience, the ability to hold your ground when circumstances shake, when pressure rises, when uncertainty grows teeth. Yet look at modern culture. People are encouraged to soften themselves, to avoid discomfort, to turn away from anything that feels difficult. But difficulty is exactly what forges resilience. Machiavelli wasn't praising harshness. He was warning against fragility. In his world, fragile leaders toppled quickly. In our world, fragile minds collapse under far less. No one respects fragility, not even the people who claim they do. People gravitate toward those who are calm under pressure, steady when others panic, confident when others doubt. That doesn't require aggression. It requires internal strength, a quiet kind of power, not one worn like armor, but one carried like discipline, the type that makes others feel safe, inspired, or steady in your presence. And that brings us to another truth people avoid. Being agreeable doesn't guarantee respect. Niceness is pleasant, but niceness alone isn't influence. Machiavelli never said kindness was weakness. In fact, he understood the value of generosity, empathy, and fairness. What he rejected was the idea that simply being agreeable earns you loyalty or admiration. Think of the people you respect most. They aren't the ones who fold under pressure or say yes to avoid conflict. They are the ones who can be kind without being pushed over, open-minded without being exploited, firm without being cruel. Strength and kindness together command far more respect than niceness ever could. Niceness asks for approval. Strength earns it. Machiavelli understood something else most people discover too late. Relationships, whether political alliances, friendships, or partnerships, require reciprocity, not blind loyalty. Not one-sided sacrifice, not devotion without balance. When loyalty flows in only one direction, someone eventually breaks. Not out of coldness, but out of survival. This isn't a cynical view of relationships, it's a realistic one. The people who stay in your life the longest, the people you build with, grow with, trust deeply, they're the ones who match your investment. The ones who show up when it counts. The ones who act, not just speak. Genuine loyalty is powerful, but it's mutual, not extracted. Failing to understand this is how people end up drained, resentful, or taken for granted. Machiavelli wasn't telling leaders to discard loyalty. He was telling them to protect it by ensuring it's real. Genuine alliances make you stronger. One-sided ones weaken you. And then there's reputation, the part of Machiavelli's writing that modern readers often misunderstand. He wasn't telling people to be fake. He was telling them to be intentional. People form opinions faster than ever. They judge based on what they see, what they hear, how you carry yourself, how consistently you act. That doesn't mean you should create a false persona. It means you should decide what you stand for and project it clearly. Reputation isn't about pretending. It's about aligning your actions with your values so consistently that people know exactly what to expect from you. Predictability is strength. Chaos is weakness. People trust what they can understand, and they follow what they can rely on. A strong reputation protects you far more effectively than charm or persuasion ever could. And finally, at least for now, Machiavelli understood that life isn't static. Challenges don't disappear just because you avoid them. Pressure doesn't fade simply because you wish it away. Conflict, whether internal or external, appears throughout life. Not constantly, not violently, but inevitably. Preparing yourself mentally, emotionally, strategically isn't pessimism. It's responsibility. The person who hopes difficulty never arrives collapses when it does. The person who prepares in quiet stays calm in chaos. Preparation is freedom. Prepared people don't fear uncertainty. They navigate it. Everything you've heard so far is only the first layer. These ideas aren't meant to turn you cold or suspicious or hardened. They're meant to make you aware, grounded, capable, and resilient in a world that often rewards those traits, far more than idealists want to admit. You can use this knowledge responsibly, ethically, and without harming others. Strength doesn't require cruelty. Strategy doesn't require manipulation. Awareness doesn't require paranoia. But it does require honesty about yourself, about others, about the patterns shaping the world around you. And now that you've started to see those patterns, there's no turning back. You've come this far, which means you're ready for the part most people never reach. The part that requires you to look not only at the world with clearer eyes, but at yourself. Machiavelli understood something that many leaders, thinkers, and individuals still fail to grasp. The greatest form of power isn't the ability to control others, but the ability to control yourself, your reactions, your impulses, your fears, your assumptions. These are the forces that shape your decisions long before the outside world ever influences you. Until you understand them, you're not making choices, you're being carried by them. Think back to moments in your life when you felt powerless. Maybe you stayed silent when you should have spoken. Maybe you acted impulsively and regretted it. Maybe you allowed someone else's behavior to dictate your mood, your confidence, or your direction. Those moments weren't failures of intelligence. They were lapses in self-command. And this is something Machiavelli warned about centuries ago. A person who cannot govern their own emotions will always struggle to govern their own life. Self-command isn't about suppression, it's about clarity. When you understand your own motives, desires, fears, and habits, they stop being hidden forces and start becoming tools. You can choose with intention instead of reacting blindly. You can respond strategically instead of emotionally. You can decide how you want to show up, instead of defaulting to whatever your instincts push you toward. And here's the truth most people avoid. Discipline is far more powerful than inspiration. Inspiration fades, motivation rises and falls. But discipline, the ability to follow through even when the feeling isn't there, that's what builds strength. Machiavelli wrote about this indirectly when he described virtue, a kind of internal force made of courage, consistency, and intention. It's not about being fearless. It's about facing your fears with direction. It's not about being perfect. It's about being committed. You don't develop that by waiting. You develop it by doing. Slowly, repeatedly, quietly. People assume power is loud, but most power is silent. The habits you build when no one is watching determine the resilience you have when everyone is. But there's another side to internal power that Machiavelli understood. With uncanny accuracy, fortune, not luck in the childish sense, but the unpredictable nature of life itself. Circumstances change, opportunities appear without warning, challenges arrive without invitation. And those who succeed over time aren't the ones who rely on fortune. They're the ones who prepare for it. Preparation doesn't guarantee success, but lack of preparation guarantees struggle. Think of how often people miss opportunities not because they're incapable, but because they weren't ready when the moment arrived. They didn't build the skill, the confidence, the experience, the stability needed to take advantage of the chance when fortune finally turned in their favor. Machiavelli never suggested controlling fate. He suggested meeting it with strength. If the river floods, you build the banks before the water rises, not after it washes everything away. That's life. Most people react to events once it's too late. Prepared people move before the tide shifts. That's not paranoia, it's foresight. And foresight brings us to another truth. People rarely reveal their intentions directly. They express them through patterns. You can learn more about someone by observing what they consistently do than by listening to what they occasionally say. This isn't about suspicion. It's about understanding human behavior with accuracy instead of wishful thinking. If someone repeatedly breaks promises, the pattern matters more than the explanation. If someone repeatedly supports you, the pattern matters more than the compliment. If someone consistently avoids responsibility, that tells you more than any excuse. People show you who they are through repetition. Behavior is information, but most people ignore that information because they hope the story will be different. Machiavelli's advice wasn't to distrust everyone, it was to trust what is proven, not what is promised. Trust becomes stronger when grounded in reality, not fantasy. And that's true in every type of relationship, personal, professional, social, or political. When you recognize patterns without emotional distortion, you stop walking into avoidable pain. You make clearer choices. You choose better alliances. You protect your energy more effectively. And you build relationships rooted in truth, not illusion. But understanding others isn't enough. Machiavelli knew that perception shapes outcomes just as profoundly as intention. How people interpret your actions often matters as much as the actions themselves. This isn't fakery, it's communication. If your intentions are good, but your delivery is unclear, people misunderstand you. If your message is valuable but your presence is scattered, people overlook you. If your values are strong but your behavior is inconsistent, people question you. You already influence how others perceive you, whether you mean to or not. The difference is whether you do it consciously. When you show up with clarity, clear boundaries, clear values, clear communication, you reduce unnecessary chaos. You interact with purpose. You reduce misunderstandings. You create stability around you. Stability is one of the most underrated forms of power. Not dominance, not intimidation. Stability, the calm presence in a chaotic room, the steady voice when everyone else panics, the grounded perspective when emotions are running high. People gravitate toward that, not because they're weak, but because stability is rare and incredibly valuable. Now there's a misconception that Machiavelli praised ruthlessness. But what he actually praised was adaptability. Rigidity breaks under pressure. Flexibility survives. And adapting doesn't mean abandoning your principles. It means adjusting your strategy while holding on to your integrity. You don't need to compromise who you are. You just need to be capable of adjusting how you move. Think about how many people resist change, even when it's clearly necessary. They cling to routines that no longer serve them, habits that drain them, relationships that limit them. They stay the same because the familiar feels safe, but nothing is static. Not economies, not careers, not relationships, not identities. The people who thrive aren't the ones who avoid change. They're the ones who work with it. Machiavelli wasn't telling people to become unpredictable. He was telling them to become adaptable, to remain themselves while navigating shifting landscapes, to remain anchored while adjusting their sails. But adaptability requires honesty, the kind of honesty many people avoid because it forces them to confront their own weaknesses. Strength isn't pretending you have no flaws. Strength is recognizing your flaws so they stop controlling you. Everyone has blind spots. Everyone has insecurities. Everyone has patterns they're not proud of. Ignoring them doesn't protect you. It exposes you. Self-awareness is one of the most powerful forms of protection. When you know your weaknesses, no one can use them against you. When you know your triggers, no one can manipulate your reactions. When you know your fears, they stop dictating your decisions. Machiavelli valued knowledge, especially self-knowledge, because it fortified people from the inside out. And once you understand yourself, something shifts. You stop chasing validation. You stop fearing judgment. You stop shrinking to fit into expectations that were never meant for you. You start operating from strength instead of insecurity. You stop reacting and start choosing. You stop surviving and start directing your life. Directing your life is not about controlling everything around you. It's about controlling how you move through it. Power isn't about domination. Influence isn't about coercion. Strength isn't about intimidation. They're about clarity, choice, presence, responsibility. Machiavelli's wisdom isn't a blueprint for manipulating others, it's a blueprint for mastering yourself and navigating the world with awareness instead of naivety. And here's the final truth. The world rewards those who understand how it works, not those who cling to how they wish it worked. People who understand human nature communicate better, lead better, build better relationships, and make clearer decisions. They aren't cold, they're perceptive. They aren't detached, they're aware. They don't seek to exploit, they seek to navigate reality without illusions. You don't need to become cynical to become wise. You don't need to become harsh to become strong. You don't need to manipulate anyone to move through life with strategy and purpose. What you need is awareness. And awareness begins with a choice to stop looking away from the truths that shape your world. You've made that choice by listening this far. Now you have two paths. Ignore what you've learned and return to old habits, or use this knowledge to build something stronger within yourself. The world won't change overnight, but you can. And when you do, the world responds differently. Not because it has changed, but because you have. This is not the end of Machiavelli's lessons. It's the beginning of your understanding. The moment you stop being confused by the behavior of others. The moment you stop being surprised by your own reactions. The moment you start seeing the patterns behind the mask. That is the moment you begin living with intention instead of accident. And that is where real power begins, not with control, but with clarity.